So you asked me to tell you a little bit about this experience that I had, and I was well into my career. By the time I was done, I'd spent 20 years with Abbott Laboratories in 4 different divisions and numerous different positions. By this time, I was in a management role, and I was with one of our joint ventures, and I was managing, we have a department of about 48, and there were 4 different functions. We were in marketing operations, and one of my employees, one of those like my clients who are all on their A game, like brave, courageous, smart, successful people. This woman was that kind of person, and she was that employee that you want to clone 20 times. Like, they're just like gold, and you just like them too, and all of a sudden she started coming in late, calling in sick. Behavior was erratic. It was clear something was up, something was off. And eventually we learned that there was trouble at home, and she and her husband were stepping in to help out her daughter and their grandson. And then shortly after that, little AJ was having trouble, and at first they thought it was just leg aches and growing pains. He was about 2. And long story short, he was diagnosed with a glioblastoma, and it was terminal. And it was a pretty brutal time for all of us, even though we weren't directly impacted. We were kind of living through the whole experience with them. Michael my husband is a PhD molecular biologist, a geneticist with specialty in cancer work, and so he was looking at some of the pathology reports and giving us a little bit of feedback, giving them some insight, and the prognosis wasn't good. And so it wasn't long before he was in like Make-A-Wish and all those things. And it was tough because myself and another one of my employees, we also had 2-year-olds, so every day you're kind of in a there but for the grace of God go I process. It kind of brings you closer to what's real. And the prognosis was Alec would is it all right? Anyway, the prognosis was that AJ would maybe have 12 months. He ended up living for 24 months, and it became this kind of magical ride to just be with him in the best way you could be, while you could be, in a loving way. And there were a lot of reparations within the family, a lot of healing work happened. We as a collective and we're kind of walking the walk with her to the extent we could and providing support. And eventually he passed, and he was, I guess, right around 4, and went to the funeral. It wasn't a funeral, it was like an all-day memorial service, essentially, and then they had a funeral. I went to part of the memorial service. People would come and go because of the length of it. And when I walked through the lobby, it was a very, very large funeral home, and there were all these kids, like hundreds of kids, dressed like in their communion or finest, their Sunday best, and then playing and jumping off of couches and just being kids, and that was lovely. And then you walked into this giant room, and there were all these people, and they would kind of do a homily or tell stories, and then there'd be singing or like almost like chanting and hallelujahs, and sometimes in Spanish and sometimes in English, and it was just very colorful and emotional. And after about 3 hours, I was like, okay, I gotta go. And but I wanted to go pay my respects first, and they had AJ, and it was like a 4-foot long little white casket, and it was a closed casket, and they had an image of him who was in like a little boy in a 3-piece suit, little dimples, just look happy as could be. And the family was off, still to the side, and I got up to the casket and I started crying, and sorry, I'm like, and all of a sudden I heard a voice, and you can imagine my surprise, and I'm like kind of looking around like, what? And I heard it again, and it was Mrs. Class, don't cry. And I'm looking around some more, and I'm not seeing anybody, and I'm in to myself, just quietly, like, what's going on here, right? And then I heard it again, and he said, Mrs. Class, it's okay. It's really okay. And I realized I'm having a conversation with someone, and I've had other times where I've heard voices or felt like I was being talked to by someone, and so I assume this is AJ, and AJ's talking to me, and he says, Mrs. Class, it's been a great life. And in a 4-year-old kind of way, he said it. And I'm kind of confused, but and I'm still crying, and he's like, they took such good care of me, they love me, we had lots of fun. It's been a good life. I'm okay. And yeah, it was so real. So I kind of just took that all in, and then I went on to pay my respects and leave. And thankfully I had this lobby full of playing children to walk through, because that held me for a little bit. And then I got to my car, and I don't think I got more than about a half mile away, and I had to pull over, and just it was sad for me and shocking, this conversation. And while I was sitting there, I kind of remembered when Michael and I met. We met on an Abbott Ski Club ski trip in Crested Butte, Colorado. And we played 20 questions over and over again all day long for a week on this trip, and it's when we fell in love. And there were 3 questions in particular that he asked me that he was like, you had me there, right? And the first question was, who's the most important person in your life? And I'd done enough work on myself at that point to say, me. Me. If I don't take care of myself, then I can't take care of you or anybody else. And so I need to make myself important. So me. And I said, but let me be clear. If you and I were married and we had an infant and the house was burning down, I'd go for the infant. Otherwise, it's me first, us second, children third, usually. And that's served us for 28 years so far. And then the second question he asked me was, what's the most important job of a parent? And I said, well, that's easy. I've been thinking about that for a long time. I said 3 things. 1, that my kids know that they're loved and lovable, period. Independent of their achievements, their appearance, anything else, that they just know that. And more importantly, that they know how to do that for themselves. And number 2, that they feel protected. And I teach them about self-respect, other respect, and boundaries, and the importance of that, because I grew up most of my life not having them, and it wreaked havoc on my life. And that they know, that they know how to do this for themselves. And number 3, that we prepare them for the rest of life, that we do our job as parents. We took responsibility for bringing a life into the planet. That's our job, is to prepare them for life and to launch them, which is the phase we're in now. But in that moment when I was on the side of the road, and I was remembering Alec, and I thought, I'm working full time, and I'm having more and more responsibility at work. I'm moving into the higher leadership in the organization, and my husband is too, and we're both working long hours, and we have au pairs for childcare, and we're busy, and it's wonderful. And I'm asking myself, I'm okay with the trade-offs I've been making, but I wonder if I am. Like, do my kids know that they're loved and lovable? Do they feel protected? Do they know how to do this for themselves? Am I preparing them the way I committed to? Am I modeling what I want them to see and know and learn? And do they need a cancer diagnosis? for us to be really clean about it and with them. And I'm not saying that that's what that family needed at all. I don't, you know, all I know is they got to a more joyful place in a terrible situation. But I was one of the lucky ones where my kids were still alive. And I wanted to honor my commitments to them fully, to the best of my ability. And I know that in that moment on the side of the road, that's when my grip on my career loosened. I still loved my work and I loved my career. And something was beginning to shift. And I was moving toward the end of an arc in my life. And on some level, I knew that. And it took a few more years for that to all play out. But without that moment, without those defining moments like that, we may still not be able to make sense of what else is stirring yet at the different levels in us. But it's stirring. And most of my clients who come to me, I know they're stirring. You know, there's a soup that's, you know, it's been in the pot for a while, and something new is trying to come forth, or that burst of flavor and color, it's trying to come forth, and it requires us to have the courage to look and to be willing to pause and to say, maybe it's time to bring this to a close, and maybe this is what wants to happen. Or we just honor where we've been, and you know what, I'm going to keep doing this. I'm just going to be a little bit more wide awake about it, and I understand the trade-offs even more clearly, and I'm clean, and I'm okay. And then the seed's planted for the doors open so that that new choice can be made when you're ready, if at all. And so I remember that time. I don't know that I fully appreciated the message in the moment. It took a while for me to look back on it and realize that was a defining moment and a shift for me that was in the making. And it would have been nice to have people in my life that could have helped to reflect that back to me and help me to start to own what was happening inside, or find the way to articulate it more clearly and spaciously. My husband was very supportive, so yay. And then fast forward, when things started to change on the job, I knew what I needed to do.